It often began without effort. When someone hurt you, you found a way to understand them. You listened, you waited, you softened your heart. Forgiveness came quietly, like a habit learned early, like something that made the world feel less sharp. People noticed it too. They called you kind, patient, mature. They trusted you with their mistakes, and you carried that role gently. You learned how to make space for other people's flaws, how to explain their behavior in calmer words, how to believe that everyone was doing the best they could with what they had. Forgiving others felt natural, almost instinctive, as if your heart knew the way without needing directions. But somewhere inside that kindness, something stayed unfinished. You moved on from old conflicts. You released anger that once felt heavy. Outwardly, things settled. Conversations ended peacefully. Time passed. Life looked normal again. Yet in the quiet moments, there was a small imbalance you couldn't name. The same grace you gave so freely outward never seemed to turn back toward you. Your own mistakes didn't receive explanations. Your own choices weren't softened by context. You remembered your past with sharper edges, replaying moments with a different tone, a harsher voice. Forgiveness stopped at the border of your own name. Still, none of this made you cruel. It only revealed how deeply you cared. Your compassion was never missing. It was simply directed away, leaving a quiet space behind, unnoticed, waiting, quietly waiting for you to notice it too. And that space felt familiar, like an unanswered letter inside, never opened, never burned, simply carried forward through days that looked calm, and nights too. After forgiveness was given, things became quieter on the outside. Conversations softened. Old tensions stopped visiting as often. People moved on, and life seemed to reward you with calm. There were fewer arguments to revisit, fewer memories demanding explanation. From a distance, it looked like peace had arrived. But inside, the quiet felt different. It wasn't the gentle kind that rests you. It was heavier, like a room with the lights turned off, but the door still open. You noticed it in small moments, when the day finally slowed down, when distractions faded, when nothing was asking for your kindness anymore. You had done what was expected. You had chosen understanding over resentment. You had released what once hurt, so the silence felt confusing, almost unfair. You waited for relief to step in and fill the space, but it didn't. Instead, the stillness carried a weight you couldn't explain. It followed you quietly, in peaceful mornings, in ordinary routines, in moments that should have felt settled. There was no noise, no conflict, yet something remained unresolved, like an echo without a sound. You wondered why forgiveness hadn't brought rest, why doing the right thing hadn't softened everything inside. The world felt calmer, but your thoughts lingered, restless, circling the same unanswered feeling. It wasn't pain in a dramatic way, it was absence, a sense that something had been skipped over, left behind when everyone else moved forward. And in that silence, without blame or anger, a quiet question began forming, asking why peace had arrived everywhere except where you lived with yourself, day after day, quietly, patiently, breathing through evenings, listening to thoughts return again, without answers yet, waiting softly for something unnamed inside stillness, alone, unnoticed, quietly, present. When the silence stayed, memory slowly stepped forward,
not in loud scenes or dramatic moments, but in quiet details you once ignored. A tone in your voice, a choice made too quickly, a moment you meant to return to but didn't. At the time they felt small, almost harmless, easily forgotten among busy days. Now they arrive differently. You remember them from the present, carrying everything you know now. What once felt ordinary gains weight. What felt temporary becomes permanent in memory. The past hasn't changed, but your distance from it has. You see it with sharper eyes and somehow less mercy. You notice how gently you remember others. Their mistakes come with explanations. Their flaws sit inside full stories. You remember their fear, their pressure, their reasons. Time softens them in your mind. But when memory turns inward, the tone shifts. Your own past is replayed without context. Words are taken out of the moment they were spoken. Decisions are stripped of the confusion you felt back then. You judge earlier versions of yourself using understanding you didn't have at the time. It feels unfair, yet familiar. You don't shout at the past, you simply revisit it again and again, quietly measuring who you were against who you became. Regret settles softly, not as punishment, but as weight, a feeling that something should have been done differently, even if you didn't know how. In the present, life continues. You move forward, grow, change. Still, memory walks behind you, holding small moments that now feel heavier than they ever did when they first passed through your hands.
They rest there without drama, without resolution, not demanding tears, not asking forgiveness, just present, waiting. And each time they return, you feel the distance between who you were and who you are, stretching quietly, reminding you how memory can bruise gently, without ever raising its voice inside the still passing moments. The pattern doesn't announce itself loudly. It shows up quietly, in the way your heart keeps different rules. When others stumble, you instinctively make room for their humanity. You remember their circumstances, their tiredness, their fear. You understand that people act from places they don't always control. With yourself, the room is smaller. You notice how quickly understanding turns into judgment when the memory belongs to you. The same kindness pauses, hesitates, then disappears. Where others were allowed mistakes, you are measured. Where others were given time, you are rushed. The heart, it seems, learned 2 languages. This realization doesn't arrive with anger. It comes with a soft surprise. You begin to see the imbalance without defending it or fighting it. You simply notice how familiar it feels, how long it has been there, shaping the way you speak to yourself in quiet moments. There is no cruelty in it, only habit. You weren't trying to be unfair. You were trying to be better. Somewhere along the way, improvement turned into pressure, and pressure turned into self-criticism. You expected growth without allowing error, clarity without confusion, strength without rest. Seeing this doesn't fix anything instantly, but it changes the way the weight sits. Instead of drowning inside it, you are standing beside it, watching the pattern repeat itself. For the first time, the struggle feels observable rather than personal. And in that small distance, something shifts. Not forgiveness yet, just recognition. Just the calm awareness that the heart has been judging itself by rules it never asked anyone else to live by. It remains quiet, unfinished, but clearer,
as if a light has been turned on, not to accuse, but to simply reveal the shape of what has been carried for a very long time inside the human heart quietly. By now, the weight has settled into your days. Nothing dramatic announces it. You wake up, move through routines, answer messages, finish tasks. From the outside, everything looks steady, even calm. You smile when needed. You function well enough. No one sees anything wrong. Inside, the tiredness is constant. It doesn't feel like sadness or anger. It feels like carrying something invisible that never gets set down. A quiet heaviness that follows you through ordinary moments. You feel it while doing. You tell yourself you're fine because nothing is visibly broken. Life keeps moving, and so do you. But beneath that movement, there is fatigue shaped by unspoken self-blame. Not loud accusations, just a steady pressure reminding you of what you think you should have done differently. The contrast becomes exhausting. Outward calm, inward effort. You perform normalcy while quietly managing the weight of unresolved feelings. Rest doesn't fully rest you. Distractions don't fully distract you. Even simple things, during conversations, in pauses between thoughts. It drains energy without making noise. You carry this alone, not because you want to, but because it's hard to explain. How do you describe being tired without being sad? How do you explain emptiness without loss? So you keep going, you show up, you endure the days with quiet strength, and in that endurance the exhaustion deepens, unnoticed by others, misunderstood even by yourself. Not because you are weak, but because you have been carrying more than anyone ever asked you to carry, silently, patiently, every day. It settles into your body, into your breath, into the way silence feels heavier than sound. You don't complain, you adapt, and slowly the tiredness becomes familiar, like background noise you stop questioning, even as it quietly asks to be seen, not fixed, not solved, just acknowledged, resting briefly in awareness for the first time in a long while without needing to prove anything to anyone at all. Night changes the way everything sounds. The day finally releases you, and distractions lose their strength. Rooms grow still, lights soften, and in that quiet, the story you tell yourself begins to speak more clearly. During the day, you manage well. You stay occupied. You move forward without looking too closely. There is always something to do, somewhere to be, something to focus on. Strength becomes a role you wear naturally. At night, there is no audience. You lie awake with your thoughts, and they arrive without permission. The mind revisits moments the day kept distant. Words replay, feelings surface. There is no need to appear calm anymore, and without that effort, honesty slips in. This is where self-forgiveness feels hardest. Without noise, without movement, there is nowhere to place the weight except inside yourself. You don't argue with it, you simply listen. The voice is not cruel, just persistent. It reminds you of who you were, who you hoped to be, and where those two don't seem to match. The contrast becomes clear. Daytime distraction offered relief, nighttime stillness offered truth.
You notice how gently you would speak to someone else in this moment, how patiently you would listen. But when the story's yours, kindness hesitates. You hold yourself to account in silence, believing this honesty is necessary, even if it hurts. And yet, beneath the heaviness, there is something tender happening. You are finally present with yourself, without performance, without explanation. Just a human being in a quiet room listening to their own story unfold slowly, word by word, in the dark, waiting not for answers, but for understanding to arrive, gently in its own time. The night holds this truth softly, asking nothing, allowing you to remain exactly here. Something shifts quietly around this point. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but enough to change the way the weight is held. You begin to notice that forgiveness itself was never missing. It was present all along, steady and familiar, just facing outward. You remember how easily it flowed toward others, how naturally you understood their limits, how instinctively you softened their mistakes. That part of you never disappeared. It simply learned a direction. The struggle, then, was never about learning how to forgive. It was about where that forgiveness was allowed to land. For a long time it was pointed away from you, protecting others, keeping peace, smoothing edges, and you thought that was the whole story. This realization doesn't bring relief yet. It brings clarity. A calm awareness that settles without demanding action. You see now that the exhaustion didn't come from a lack of compassion, but from its constant outward movement. The contrast becomes visible. What felt like failure begins to look like misdirection. What felt like hardness begins to look like misplacement. You weren't incapable of kindness. You were generous with it. And in seeing this, the story loosens slightly. Not enough to disappear, not enough to resolve everything, but enough to breathe, enough to understand that the pain was never proof of something broken inside you. It was evidence of something present, something active, something quietly working in the background, waiting to be noticed. Awareness doesn't fix the past, but it softens the way you stand with it now. For the first time, you aren't asking forgiveness to appear. You are simply noticing where it has always been and where it has not yet been invited. There is no urgency here, only a quiet pause. Understanding arrives without instruction, without pressure, just a soft recognition that changes how the silence feels and how gently you can finally remain inside it, without turning away, this time quietly. There is no ceremony to this moment, no music, no sudden emotion. It happens quietly, almost accidentally, when you stop turning away from yourself and simply stay. You don't rush to fix anything. You don't demand clarity. You sit with what is there. For a long time, movement felt safer. Distraction, analysis, self-critique. They kept you busy, kept you from feeling too closely. But now there is a different kind of stillness. Not avoidance, not numbness, presence. You imagine sitting beside yourself the way you would sit beside someone tired, not facing them, not questioning them, just sharing the same space, the same silence. There is nothing to explain, nothing to justify. The past does not need defending here. This is unfamiliar. Without judgment, the mind doesn't know what to do at first. It waits for accusations that never come. It listens for pressure that doesn't arrive. And slowly the tension softens, not because anything is forgiven, but because nothing is being attacked. You notice the difference between running from yourself and resting with yourself. One requires constant energy, the other asks only for honesty. No conclusions, no promises. In this quiet meeting, acceptance is not a decision, it is a condition. You allow yourself to exist exactly as you are, with unfinished feelings and unanswered questions. Healing doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel productive. It feels still. It feels like staying seated when the urge is to leave.
And in that staying, something settles. Not everything, just enough. Enough to feel less divided. Enough to know that this presence, gentle and unforced, is where kindness can finally begin, without needing a name or a demand placed upon it. It remains quiet, patient and open, allowing you to breathe without judgment, effort, explanation, or fear, for the first time tonight. The past doesn't disappear in this space. It sits with you, quietly, no longer dragged forward by force. You don't erase it, you don't correct it, you simply allow it to exist as it is, without turning it into a weapon against yourself. Before, memory arrived with sharp edges. Each mistake carried a sentence. Each decision demanded payment. You revisited old moments as if they were evidence, proof of something lacking. The past was not just remembered, it was enforced. Now, awareness changes the relationship. You can see what happened without stepping back into it. The difference is subtle but real. Then was confusion, pressure, limited sight. Now is distance, context, and growth. The events stay the same, but the way you hold them softens. There is relief in neutrality, not approval, not denial, just the absence of punishment. You stop adding extra weight to moments that have already passed. You let them rest where they belong, behind you, without constantly pulling them into the present.
This doesn't mean the past loses meaning. It means it no longer controls the tone of your inner voice. Memory becomes information, not accusation. Experience, not evidence. You notice how peace feels less dramatic than expected. It doesn't arrive as happiness, it arrives as space. Space where blame used to sit, space where breath feels easier. The past remains part of you, but it no longer defines you. It sits quietly, acknowledged, unchallenged, without needing forgiveness or defense. And in that still allowance, something loosens. You are no longer standing trial for who you were. You are simply here, aware, present, and free enough to let the story rest without continuing to punish yourself for surviving it the only way you knew how at the time, back then. Nothing changes all at once. There is no moment where everything feels healed or resolved. What changes is smaller, quieter, a shift in direction. The kindness that once moved easily towards others begins to notice you too. It doesn't arrive as forgiveness in the way you imagined. It comes as patience, as a softer tone when memory returns, as the choice to stay instead of turning away. You begin to treat yourself less like a problem to solve and more like a person to sit with. This kindness feels unfamiliar at first, awkward even. You don't always trust it. Some days it slips away, replaced by old habits, but it returns again gently, without forcing itself to stay. You realize it doesn't need to be perfect to be real, it only needs to exist. There is comfort in knowing you don't have to rush, that self-forgiveness is not a single act, but a slow companionship, a way of being with yourself through uncertainty, through unfinished feelings, through days that still feel heavy. The contrast that once hurt now softens. You no longer stand apart from yourself, judging from a distance. You walk alongside yourself, aware of flaws, aware of growth, carrying both without rejection. In this quiet closeness, safety forms, not because the past has changed, but because your relationship with yourself has. You are no longer alone with your thoughts, you are present with them, and that presence feels like home,
a calm place where nothing needs proving, where kindness does not have to be earned, where you are allowed to exist, imperfect and human, held by understanding you once gave freely away.